to virtue than an absence of sin. A wine may be flawless, yet desperately dull. So my remit in writing this book is to go beyond simply the avoidance of faults and to touch on the semi-philosophical question of the nature of beauty as it applies to wine. As well as the traditional roster of faults, I will include more novel and perhaps controversial categories. Wine faults are interesting. The topic of wine faults is of great interest. It is a rich, nuanced, complicated subject that strays from wine chemistry through microbiology to human perception and quality judgments. Some faults are universally agreed on. I can't see many people arguing a strong case for cork taint by 2,4,6-trichloroanisole, widely known simply as TCA, being a complexing factor. Other faults are more a question of degree and personal preference. The spicy, medicinal, animal savoriness imparted by Brettanomyces yeast is a great example. Some make a distinction between faults and taints. Defined as resulting from the fermentation process, faults include oxidation, Brettanomyces, volatile acidity, and reduction. A taint, in this classification scheme, is when a wine is affected by an extraneous flavor chemical, such as cork taint, eucalyptus taint, or smoke taint. Faults are generally internal, says Adrian Coulter of the Australian Wine Research Institute, like something microbial or something wrong with the wine. Taints are something coming from the outside. It might still be something in the winemaking. For example, a wine additive might be tainted with a compound, and you add it to the wine, and it taints it. In this book, I refer to both categories as faults. Looking for the positives. I hope that the overall tone of this book will be rather positive. I also hope that it will inspire winemakers to be more creative, and not just more defensive, in their winemaking. It is through a full understanding of faults, their origins, and their complexity, acknowledging that the presence of a specific character can be negative in some wines but positive in others, that winemakers can leave the overly defensive path that can result in rather sterile, clean but uninspiring, technically correct wines. Some wines are clearly faulty to all. Others split opinion. This will be a recurring theme as I examine faults one by one. Who gets to decide whether a wine is faulty or not? That's a good question, and we may have to leave the rather handy dualistic division between faulty and correct wines and move to a worldview that offers more of a continuum, at least for those wines that fall into the gray area between the two firm positions. And it looks like we will not be able to make the following pronouncement. If a wine contains chemical X at a level greater than Y micrograms per liter, then it is faulty. It turns out there are only a limited number of instances where this sort of rule makes sense. The science behind faults. While a lot of good research on wine faults has been published in peer-reviewed scientific journals, there is much that is still not documented in rigorous scientific terms. So, I haven't restricted my research to the published literature. This book will include the experiences of winemakers from around the globe. These people, day in and day out, come face to face with wine faults, and their accumulated experience is a valuable source of information. On many of the topics, an honest answer will be, "We suspect," or even, "We just don't know." Perfection versus imperfection, on the nature of beauty. I want to introduce a concept that I think is really helpful for understanding wine faults, and for grasping the notion that some flavor chemicals can be both faulty and positive, depending on the concentration and the context. This is the Japanese concept.